English translation 636 contact Thursday, the 26th of November 2015, 16:12 hours.
I'm glad you're still here, Enjana. Greetings and welcome. Unfortunately, I was a little tired because I didn't have Florena's report in the file, so you had to wait.
Don't be sad about it. Come greetings.
You said you wanted to address something special.
That is right, because on the one hand, I wanted to ask you something that Pata asked me to do, namely whether you've already done a draft for a new Figu organization that you're supposed to do. On the other hand, I want to say a few things about the Islamist state.
Oh well, yes, I did the design, and I took the liberty of expanding the whole thing a little, except for the open words, as Pata suggested. Pita said that we should use this new organ to publish important articles etc. from core group and passive members etc., as well as important explanations from contact reports, while the time signal should only be used for newspaper articles. Look here, I made this draft for the front page of the first issue in the computer so you can scan it and then give it to Pata for review.
Well, already done. And immediately I have transmitted your draft also into my aircraft, and from there to Pata. It can be assumed that we can expect his answer in a few minutes.
Let us be surprised. Then now you can talk about what you wanted to say.
It is my need to confirm what you have said and written in the last months concerning the Islamist state of the IS terror militia, namely that the Islamist state in no way has anything to do with Islam. The Islamist believers and the Islamic states, whose citizens are righteous people in their Islam faith, and have nothing to do with the IS murder militia. As a result of my task, I'm involved in the recording and study, etc., of all earthly events and procedures of media, medical, military, political, technical, terrorist, and economic forms. I have good knowledge in this respect. In everything, I keep noticing that in the media there is always talk of an Islamic state instead of an Islamist state, if at all of such a state could be spoken of. Because in reality it is not a state, but a murderer organization. You, on the other hand, write the whole thing correctly and call what must be effective, because the actual believers in Islam in states that can be called Islamic states are honorable, good, and righteous people who have nothing to do with the murderous terrorist IS militias, and thus nothing to do with the Islamists and the so-called Islamist state. Want nothing to do with it and vehemently reject it. In your statements and explanations, you yourself have repeatedly explained everything according to its correctness, while the entire Earth human media journalism of newspapers, journals, radio and television, etc., have still not understood the difference between Islamism and Islamism, respectively Islamic State and Islamist State, and therefore still speak and write of the murderous militia Islamist State as Islamic State. But this is fundamentally wrong and borders on the stupidity and ignorance of those responsible. By which I mean, on the one hand, the media journalists, and on the other hand, those responsible for the media, such as the designers and editors of the media, but also the presenters of the television programs and the news presenters. But as you have often written now, but as our language scholars also explain, the term Islam refers to a certain religion which is oriented towards a so-called holy book, namely the Quran. If a somewhat more precise linguistic analysis of the words Islam and Islamic is taken into consideration, our linguists say then a very decisive meaning results, which must be interpreted as Allah devotion, God devotion, which further means for the Islam believer that he should trust that Allah exists. Thus, he must try to build his life on this trust. Consequently, the believer, according to this basic meaning of the term Islam, is a Muslim. The meaning aspect of the terms Islam and Islamic in modified form, just with an addition of the syllable est, from which the words Islamist and Islamist arise. So, our languages, learned, teach, mean the two terms Allah aversion to God, and thus in the sense of religious faith as something which is reprehensible to faith, blasphemous, sacrilegious, blasphemous and sinful.
The Quran, however, is not based on the effective message of the Prophet Muhammad, but largely on human falsifications of doctrine, points of view and false laws, etc., which were gathered together and cobbled together long after Muhammad's death, and which have very little or nothing to do with Muhammad's doctrine, which unfortunately is not generally known to Islam believers. In fact, they do not know that what Muhammad taught is the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life. From the word Muslim, the meaning is derived, for example, the one who professes to Islam or who surrenders in Allah God. Thus, this term is applicable for the followers of the religion Islam. Basically, according to the understanding of Islam, the person who pronounces the Islamic confession of faith, the Shahada, in front of witnesses and thus publicly is a Muslim according to religious law, whereby the believer expresses himself and says, I testify that there is no God except Allah God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. It should also be said that if the term salam, which belongs to the same root and means salvation or peace, is included in the definition of the term Islam, then it is a word which is linguistically closely related to the Hebrew shalom or peace. And
Just a moment, dear friend. Yes, there is Ptah's answer. It finds your design good and appropriate to the purpose. Therefore, it should be used in this form in the future.
thanks also to Ptah.
Then, everything that had to be said is said for today. So I want to go and say goodbye.
Yes, goodbye, and please say hello to Florina.